Welcome, Professor. I'm Yi Yan. In this video, I'll discuss the differences between two models that explain individual saving decisions, one from neoclassical consumer theory and the other from behavioral economics. Then I'll proceed to discussing how such difference inform policymaking and offer my recommendation to resolve the issue. First of all, let's compare the two models. Under neoclassical consumer theory, assuming that the consumer has Cobb-Douglas preference and hence a utility function as shown in the slide, the optimal decision is to consume at a tangency where the marginal rate of substitution is equal to the negative of the gradient of the budget line. The construction of the indifference curve is the same as before, and we assume that non-satiation and convexity constraints are satisfied. However, the budget line is different. Since saving is an intertemporal decision, it will involve a trade-off between current and future consumptions. As consumption depends on income, we'll need to account for the time value of money in order to make investment decisions that maximizes one's utility. In period 0, assume consumers save S0. Thus, at period 1, he can consume his income Y1 plus S0 times 1 plus R, which includes his interest. Combining the two and rearranging, we arrive at an intertemporal budget constraint with slope minus 1 plus R. When interest rate increases, the budget line will pivot around the endowment point Y0, Y1, so that the new budget line is steeper. Due to substitution and income effect, consumers will borrow less and save more, since it is now more expensive to borrow and more rewarding to save. In reality, borrowing rate is usually higher than saving rate. Budget line will thus kink at Y0, Y1, with the slope above it flatter and the slope below it steeper. As consumers derive utility from consumption in the two periods, they choose C1 and C0 to maximize utility subject to an intertemporal budget constraint and non-negative constraints. Assuming perfect capital market, the utility is maximized where margin rate of substitution is equal to negative 1 plus R. Household will thus make their saving decision depending on the position of the tangency point between the budget line and the indifference curve. However, the above explanation is too idealistic. In real life, people do not always make the optimal saving decisions, and so they often suffer from insufficient savings in retirement. Such deviation from utility maximization can be explained by behavioral economics, and specifically experienced and decision utility. When people are young, they make saving decisions based on their decision utility, which dictate a preference for current consumption. However, when they are old, they derive their utility based on the experienced utility, and the choices already made render them to a lower utility level than the optimal. The time inconsistency of people results in undersaving and hence a lower utility. Therefore, behavioral economics complements neoclassical consumer theory by explaining the observed deviation from the optimal. From the comparison, we can conclude that a necessary condition for utility maximization is the ability of economic agents to make accurate or at least unbiased forecasts of the hedonic outcomes of potential choices and correctly identify their true utility, which is their experienced utility. However, research reveals that people do not always know what they like. Indeed, they often make systematic errors in predicting the future experience of outcomes and, as a result, fail to maximize their experienced utility. Systematic errors of hedonic forecasting is influenced by factors that are clearly relevant, and most hedonic forecasting is done intuitively rather than carefully considered. Such forecasts are susceptible to the biases found in other intuitive judgments. Unlike the products of deliberate and conscious reasoning activity, intuitive judgments express impressions that come spontaneously to mind and thoughts that are highly accessible according to the paper published by Thienen and Thaler. So we do not claim that people do not know what they like. They do. However, people do not always know what they will like, and they are likely to make mistakes when the temporal gap is long and the agent state and circumstances vary greatly between T1 and T0. According to researchers, 4 areas in which errors of hedonic forecasting and choices have been documented. One that best explains such behavior is emotional or motivational state. Since forecasts of future hedonic and emotional states are anchored in a current emotional state, people often suffer from projection bias or cold and hot empathy gap, as described by Lowingston, where we commonly mispredict the influence of arousal and suffer from the lack of empathy for the future self who will have to live with the choice. Hence, utility maximization is usually thought of as a goal. However, to maximize utility successfully, one must start by making a forecast about how the various possible outcomes will be experienced. And if forecasts are systematically biased, their choices will systematically fail to maximize utility. Next, we'll discuss how this difference has informed policy design. Indeed, to help individuals make optimal saving decisions, government has resorted to various policies, including tax favoring and choice architecture like nudges. First, let's look at nudges. Nudges are known as libertarian paternalism. In the context of saving, setting default options can help people to avoid the most common areas of utility maximization. Specifically in UK, government uses nudges such as auto-enrollment to encourage workers to save for their retirement. This policy compels employers to default most workers into a pension scheme from which employees can subsequently choose to opt out. But because of strong inertia, default choices are often selected even when opting out is essentially costless. Since its implementation in 2012, workplace pension saving is now becoming the norm for a new generation of workers in UK. 9 million individuals have now been automatically enrolled into a workplace scheme by the employer, with 9 out of every 10 of them continuing to save. Many of those benefiting were once poorly served or excluded from workplace pensions, but thanks to automatic enrollment, many more women, low earners, and younger people are now building an asset for the future. Such choice architecture is implemented alongside complementary tax relief policies. In UK, people get tax relief on private pension contributions worth up to 100% of their annual earnings if they are in auto-enrollment scheme. Clearly, behavioral economics allow government to better understand people's saving dilemma and implement appropriate policies to help them achieve financial independence in retirement. However, current market solutions' success is still limited. For example, for an auto-enrollment scheme, while it has led to significant increases in participation rate, its actual effect on overall household saving remains questionable. Moreover, there are also other shortfalls. For example, the current saving rate of the scheme is too low to support retirement expectations of a significant portion of the population. It also fails to address the root problem of correcting people's decision utility and changing their mindset to take personal responsibility of their financial independence. In view of these problems, I will propose to use education as the tool to tackle the issue at its core. The fundamental aim to achieve is to enable people to make decisions based on their experienced utility instead of decision utility. To do that, the government can take a three-pronged approach. Firstly, they should engage with schools to make financial education a compulsory part of normal school curriculum so as to cultivate a habit of saving since young. This solves one potential pitfall of the auto-enrollment scheme, which is the coverage gap for younger workers. This is because a comprehensive financial education will teach children about the benefits of saving, hence influence them to save for future. Secondly, the government body in charge of pension should launch mass public campaign targeted at enhancing people's awareness to save. This includes sending reminder emails to encourage saving, publishing campaign videos about the benefits of saving, or even designing form applications that make learning about saving more interesting. For example, in China, Zhifubao, the largest third-party online platform, makes saving interesting and easy through gamification. Lastly, the government can also harness the power of social media and influencers to appeal to a broader audience base. This is known as social marketing, which uses techniques from commercial marketing to achieve social goals. Public accounts can be set up on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok to regularly post saving tips from the government and the benefits of saving. Celebrities can also endorse such mass marketing by liking or reposting or becoming public ambassador of the information campaign to draw people's attention to the issue. The reason why education is particularly effective is because it can lead to a paradigm shift and tackle the issue thoroughly. Nudges and taxes are viable options, but they do not solve the root problem. The fact that people often fail to maximize utility does not imply that someone else should usurp the right to choose for them. Those in charge can guide and influence choices of people, but without restricting anyone's freedom to choose. Education will equip people with the information they need to make optimal choices while maintaining consumer sovereignty and pave way for building a culture of saving for the common good. Thank you for listening.